Milltown Cemetery and National Graves Association. Opened in 1869 following the closure of Friars Bush Cemetery due to overcrowding, Milltown Cemetery became the main Catholic cemetery in Belfast. With the rise of industrialisation, there was an increase in the population as people came from country areas seeking work. Owing to the presence of cholera and TB, many died young. Most of the Catholic migrants into the city found their graves in Milltown. It is believed there are approximately 60,000 to 80,000 buried in paupers' graves. At least 150,000 people are buried in other parts of the graveyard. Among those buried in Milltown is wee Joe Devlin, a Home Rule politician and much-loved MP for West Belfast, known as the Pocket Demosthenes. Devlin sat for West Belfast in Parliament for almost 30 years and led the Nationalist Party in Northern Ireland Parliament from 1925 to 1934. He campaigned vigorously to improve conditions and abolish sweated labour, exploitation of workers, in the Belfast linen mills, and his funeral in 1934 united Ireland for a day, attracting representatives from all sections of the community, including Belfast mill girls. His most famous election victory was in 1918 when he defeated the future president of the Irish Republic, Eamon de Valera, by a majority of 3-1. His grave in the centre of the cemetery has a bust by Doyle Jones. Among the literary figures are Victorian poet Francis Davis, the Belfast Man, and Cathal O'Byrne, the Belfast-born poet, folklorist and author of As I Roved Out, A Popular History of Belfast. Commemorated by a plaque on a former residence in nearby Cavendish Street, he died in 1957. In the centre of the poor ground, a melancholy green expanse in the cemetery, is the grave of Bishop John Tohill, who asked to be buried amongst the paupers. The cemetery contains a war memorial to West Belfast nationalists who died in World War I, which is centred on a cross of sacrifice, approached by a short flight of steps with the names of those whose graves cannot be traced, recorded on a screen wall. 105 First World War Commonwealth gravestones are also scattered throughout the cemetery. The cemetery also contains the graves of 5 Polish airmen whose Wellington bomber crashed into Mount Brandon in County Kerry in 1943. The bodies were handed over to the British authorities by an Irish Guard of Honour at Middletown on the County Armagh border. At the front of the cemetery is Priest's Row, where many Catholic bishops and priests are buried. Tradition has it that they were interred with their feet facing the gate, compared to lay people who are buried in the opposite direction. It is thought that they were closer to God and therefore would reach heaven more quickly than mere mortals. Celtic crosses are scattered throughout the graveyard and are decorated with Celtic designs, which are copies from the Book of Kells. One of the most visited parts of the cemetery is the Republican plot, which contains graves of IRA members from the 1920s to recent times who have given their lives for the pursuit of the Irish Republic. This is one of 3 plots in the cemetery which are under the care of the National Graves Association, the NGA. The NGA also organise the biggest Republican parade in Ireland, which is held every Easter Sunday here in West Belfast. The parade commemorates the Easter Rising of 1916, when Irish men and women rose up in Dublin against the British. The rising started on the Monday and finished with a surrender on the following Saturday. Within 2 weeks, 14 men were executed in Dublin and 1 in Cork. Amongst those buried here from the Irish War of Independence 1919 to 1921 is General Joseph McKelvey, a Belfast-born IRA leader who took the anti-treaty side in the Irish Civil War of 1922 to 1923. He was executed along with 3 comrades, 1 for each of the 4 provinces of Ireland, in reprisal by the Free State government for the assassination of a Doyle member by an anti-treaty IRA member in December 1922. His remains were reinterred here 2 years later. There are a number of prominent Republicans from recent times buried here, including Bobby Sands, Joe McDonnell and Kieran Doherty, who died on hunger strike in the H-Blocks in 1981. Others buried close to them are Mairead Farrell, Dan McCann and Sean Savage, who were killed by the SAS in Gibraltar in March 1988. At their funeral 10 days later, a loyalist threw grenades and fired shots at the mourners within the cemetery grounds, killing 3 and wounding numerous others. Many visitors visit the cemetery, particularly during the August Fela when guided tours are conducted. For further information on these tours, contact Ann Hulterlin on telephone number 02890 964 180.